Flying high in the friendly sky. Welcome aboard the night flight. I am your captain, Hatman. Hope you're all sitting tight. I will be your not only captain, but in-flight entertainment this evening. How are you all doing? Let me know if you can hear me loud and clear in the live chat. Shout out to Railway and Boxing Fan, June Sports, KO Kid Boxing, Dominica, Ruz B, Truth Channel, DJ, Paul Thompson, Magin Jack, Philip Answer, Eddie Tissington, JJ, Paul Thompson, Rib. What's up, what's up, what's up? So, you guys presumably know the routine by now. This is a night flight show, so it's just general conversation about whatever you guys want to talk about. It doesn't have to be boxing related. Big up Paul Thompson. Yes, if we can all slap a like on this stream, it will be much appreciated. We got 47 concurrent viewers, only 7 likes. Let's all slap a like on it. It helps visibility. Big up Chili Beef. So there's a number of things I want to talk about just off the top of the head. First of all, somebody mentioned Ammo Williams there. I had to Google it because I wasn't quite sure what they were talking about. And Carlos Adames has pulled out of the fight. Ammo Williams was looking to challenge for his first world title tomorrow, but Adames has pulled out with an apparent illness the day before. So that's going to be extremely disappointing for Ammo Williams. Will they get a replacement? I don't know. Maybe they will. Just for Ammo to get a little run out. Because when you've trained that long and you don't end up fighting and you don't get any sort of payday, obviously with a replacement opponent, he's not going to get anywhere near the payday that he was going to get for Adames, but he'll at least get something, you know? So, yeah, we'll see. Very disappointing. I was quite looking forward to that fight as well. Adames against Ammo Williams. Big up Liam Goff, aka G-Man. Yes, I did see the AJ video, and I've done a video about the AJ video on my Patreon page, which is right here. 46 minutes long, me analyzing it. You know, we all like to analyze AJ. He must be the most analyzed and perhaps over-analyzed boxer out there, at least over the past few years. But the thing that invites analysis of Anthony Joshua and over-analysis of so much of what he does is because he's so unusual. AJ's a very, very unusual character, you know, very, very unusual guy. The way he talks is unusual. His mannerisms are unusual. And the way he goes about his business to some extent is unusual. I mean, an example would be before the first Usyk fight, leaning over the ropes to talk to Clifton Mitchell and ask him how he thinks he should approach it. Like, that is so weird. Just asking a random. Obviously, Clifton Mitchell was a professional, you know, fighter back in the days. But for that night, he was obviously just, you know, heading up the security. And AJ has a trainer, or had a trainer back then, and Rob McCracken and, you know, other people assisting in the camp, and he's asking Clifton Mitchell. And that's something that AJ was known to do for years. That wasn't a one-off. Spencer Oliver has talked about that. So AJ's a very, very unusual guy. And because he's so unusual, that's why we're always trying to analyze him and overanalyze him and whatnot, because he's just so strange. He's just so strange. So we're trying to understand him. And that video that he posted yesterday has got people, including myself, analyzing him once again. There are some things which I speculate about and people's theories that I entertain for a moment and whatnot in the Patreon video that I've done, which I won't really go into here. I don't think it's appropriate to indulge in people's theories and whatnot here because it's very, very sensitive. Do you know what I mean? I'd rather do it in private, on a private forum, than do it in public. All I can say is that based upon what I saw in that video of AJ, I think he's going to be back. I do think he's going to return to boxing. And I think he's going to return sooner rather than later. I don't think he's going to be out for a very, very long time. I reckon he'll be back by September. I've seen some people say, no, AJ is going to be out for the rest of the year. I don't think so. I could be wrong, of course, but going by the way he came across in that video, I think AJ is going to be fighting again by September. As was originally, well, no, originally they were planning to fight, I think in February or March or something, and then fight maybe Luke Partridge in September. Well, I'm not sure who he'll fight in September, but I do think he'll fight by then, maybe before then. But September at the latest, I think. Black Dynamite says, I can't sit through an AJ video for the life of me. Well, yeah, he isn't the most charismatic person, so sometimes it is difficult to sit through an interview, but this video that he uploaded the other day obviously pertains to that horrible crash, and it's only about 6 minutes long, so it's a lot more watchable and digestible than your typical AJ interview or whatever. And he isn't actually being interviewed in the video, he's just monologuing. DJ says, is it me or are there more cancelled fights than usual at the moment? I'm not sure. It could be that because we aren't getting any major fights at the moment at all, that the few fights that were scheduled for this time period being cancelled, you know, makes a bigger impact on us. If there were loads and loads and loads of fights going on and a few got cancelled, or the same number got cancelled that have been cancelled now, perhaps we wouldn't pay as much attention. Do you know what I mean? I mean, the town has pulled out of fights before, right? And Adam Azim, I'm not sure if he's pulled out of a fight before, but Atama has. Pretty sure he has anyway. We got Black Dynamite. Railway Unboxing fan says Anthony Yard has teased that he might move up to cruiserweight. My thoughts on that? Well, he and Tunde were saying that for a long time they fancied the Chris Billum-Smith fight. So if they're moving up for that, then why not? Things aren't going well for Yard at light heavyweight, and if he wants to continue his career, cruiserweight is one avenue that's open for him, right? Maybe he feels like he'll be stronger or whatever at 200 pounds. We'll see. I do think it would be, from a commercial perspective, a mistake not to get that Boatsi fight on, though. I'll big up JR for the super chat. He says, would you rather live in Birmingham and not leave for the rest of your life, or be handcuffed to Don Charles for 20 years? You're welcome. I mean, talk about stuck between a rock and a hard place. Dear oh dear. But I'll go with the lesser of two evils, which is obviously being handcuffed to Don Charles. No, I'm joking. It's obviously living in Birmingham for the rest of my life is the lesser of the two evils. Supersized Fry says, I thought you were alive the other day and wasted $5 on a super chat. Thought I was alive, or do you mean thought I was not alive? If I didn't read out a super chat, I do apologize if I missed it. If you want to type it as just a normal comment now, I'll be happy to read it. Supersized Fries, just let me know. If I missed the super chat, I apologize, or I'll be happy to read any comment you got there. Big up Matt for the super chat. He says, what upset Out of all of tomorrow's matchups, do you think is most likely? I think Abbas will beat up Zayas. I think, well, the main event, a lot of people I think see it as a 50-50, but the bookies see it, the bookies have got Stevenson as a 3-1 favorite. That's a pretty, comfortable favorite. So I think that T.O. beating Shakur would be the most likely quote-unquote upset as far as the bookies go. Don't get it twisted. I'm picking Shakur to win. And in fact, I want to say something on that because Teddy Atlas did a pretty good breakdown for the Stevenson-Lopez fight. But once again, following on from his AJ Jake Paul video, he has neglected to make an out-and-out prediction. Now, I've got no issue with him not making a prediction for Stevenson Lopez because it's two high-level fighters in their prime. Anything can happen. So, he did his breakdown, doesn't want to make a prediction. That's okay. The only issue I'm going to have is if, somebody wins, let's say it's Lopez or let's say it's Stevenson, and after the fact, his son goes on the podcast and says, "Oh, you are absolutely spot on the money again, bud. You got it absolutely perfectly correct in your prediction." And then he adds it to this very dubious correct prediction tally, that Teddy Atlas has. Because, as I say, he did not make a prediction for AJ versus Jake Paul, which to me is just bizarre, right? A two-time heavyweight champion going in there against a YouTuber, it's not difficult to figure out who's going to win. So the fact he didn't make a prediction for that was bizarre. And then after the fact, his son was bigging him up to high heaven saying, "Yeah, you got it spot on the money, Dad. Your prediction was right as always." I'm like, you didn't make a prediction. How can you be praising him for an accurate prediction which he didn't flipping make? Unbelievable. And again, for this T.O. Stevenson fight, he hasn't made a prediction, which I've got no issue with per se. There are fights where I don't make a prediction because I can't choose. Maybe I'll talk about how I see the fight unfolding or possible scenarios. But yeah, all I don't want to hear after the fight, the son saying, "You were bang on correct with the prediction, Dad." No, he hasn't made a prediction. He's just given a breakdown about possible scenarios in the fight. And it was a good breakdown. But yeah, anyway. Big up JR for the super chat. Big up Matt Borgerson. G-Man says, Yard also said heavyweight, ? I think, first and foremost, he needs to leave Tunde, but unfortunately he won't. Kieran thinks CBS would smoke Yard. Oh, I see what you're saying, Supersized Fries. You mean the, yeah, because I had to take down the stream because we got into like political chat and whatever, and that's dangerous when it comes to getting zapped for demonetization. So I took it down and I edited certain parts out, re-uploaded it as a video, as a premiere. Okay. Supersized Fred says, so in my super chat I asked, prime for prime, it's Mike Tyson the only boxer you would have given a shot to? Okay, is Mike Tyson the only fighter I've given a shot to beat Usyk? No, not the only one. But I think he would have the best chance, just based on styles. Not saying that Mike Tyson is, the greatest heavyweight of all time or anything like that, but styles make fights, And based on styles, I think Mike Tyson would have the best chance. Somebody else that I think would have a decent chance would be Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes, a very, very good boxer, similar size to Usyk, very sharp, good footwork. Who else would I give a very good chance? I would say Lennox Lewis, but he never fought a southpaw as a pro. So, a lot of these guys, even Mike Tyson didn't fight a southpaw. So it's kind of difficult to make predictions versus Usyk with heavyweights from previous eras because there were so few southpaws around then comparatively. But yeah, I'll probably go with Mike Tyson having the best chance, and then maybe Larry Holmes. Big up Supersized Fries. Shout out to Matt Borgerson. He says he did on his Circle app. He doesn't put predictions to sell the ropes community. He picked Lopez to win. He went for the under. Oh, okay. Okay, fair enough. I didn't know that, Matt. So is that like a paid subscription thing? So are his predictions behind a paywall? Because if his predictions are behind a paywall, then when he gets a prediction wrong, is he going to mention it? Or does he only mention the predictions he gets right? And the ones he gets wrong, because they're behind a paywall, you'll never know about them. Is that how he does it? You tell me, Max. I don't know. But on his YouTube channel, he used to always make predictions. But starting from Jake Paul AJ, he didn't pick a winner in that fight, which to me was very odd. Because, again, it's a two-time heavyweight champion against the YouTuber. Like, how can you not predict? Oh, big up, Matt. Big up, Prav. He says, as it's the night flight, I'm going to ask a non-boxing related question. If you was on death row, what would be your last meal? Well, I would never imagine myself on death row. So I don't even want to entertain a death row scenario. But what I would say is, if I were to have my last meal, you know, if I knew that I was about to pop my clogs, to use an old expression, I probably wouldn't have a last meal. Yeah, I wouldn't have a last meal. And the reason that I wouldn't have a last meal is because when you're on the way out, at least for me, I wouldn't want to be reminded of the things that I like about this world. Do you know what I mean? Because that's going to make you feel sad about going. So I'd rather not have a meal. You know what I mean? Rather not have a last meal and just go out like that. Because if you have a last meal and it brings all memories back and you get all sentimental, and then it's going to make it worse, isn't it? So better to not have a last meal at all and just prepare yourself for the end. Big up James for the super chat. He says, movie series question. Have you seen the series Dark Matter? Interesting concept, but a little disappointing in the execution. What about the film One Battle After Another? Unfortunately, I haven't seen either of them. I haven't seen Dark Matter. I haven't seen One Battle After Another. Would you care to tell me what they're about? Are they sci-fi? Like, is Dark Matter a sci-fi series? And I'm not sure about One Battle After Another. Big up Matt, he says, also, by the time a fighter defeats a great fighter, they are usually at an advanced age because it took them their entire career to become great. Yeah, sometimes that's the case. But for example, Buster Douglas, I mean, I'm giving you the exceptions to the rule, right? If it is a rule. And you did say usually. Obviously, Buster Douglas beat a young Mike Tyson. Holyfield beat not necessarily a prime Tyson, but a Tyson that was younger than him. Which great fighters have been beaten over the past 10 years? I mean, Vladimir Klitschko was beaten early on in his career. He was beaten by Ross Purity, by Corey Saunders, by Lamont Brewster. So I don't know. I mean, sometimes great fighters lose early on in their career And the argument would be they weren't great when they lost. They only became great later. James Lynch says, Dark Matter is about alternative realities, sci-fi. It's on Apple TV. Okay. Faultline says, just think about Don Charles and you would want to die. I like things, I love sci-fi. Sci-fi is really my favorite movie genre. I love sci-fi. If I can watch it elsewhere, because I don't have Apple TV, but if I can watch it elsewhere, I'll, give it a go. Because I do love sci-fi. And, one of the reasons I love sci-fi is because it explores so many different concepts. I get bored with like regular series and movies a lot more easily because when they are set in the real world, well, sci-fi could be set in the real world, but they're dealing with fantastical concepts, right? But when stuff isn't dealing with fantastical concepts and it's just based on, normal human experiences, I can get bored of those things a lot more easily. Whereas sci-fi gets you thinking outside the box, which is why I enjoy it so much. Now, there's different types of sci-fi, obviously. There's like fantasy sci-fi, which doesn't tend to be as thought-provoking. And then there's like serious sci-fi, which does tend to be more thought-provoking, Don't get me twisted. Sometimes like fantasy sci-fi can be fun and interesting, like, Star Wars and stuff like that. But generally, I like the more hardcore type sci-fi. Do you know what I mean? Because that's when they tend to go in with the concepts, stuff that they explore in the field of quantum physics and whatnot. Even spirituality, they go there. So yeah, if I can watch it somewhere other than Apple TV, I'll try and check it out. But big up James Lynch for the super chat. Big up Ryan for the super chat. He says, Hatman, if you notice, G-Man, aka Liam, shares the same opinions on fighters as you. That's why I love yous both. Have you ever thought of collaborating? Well, we have collaborated in the past, but we're both busy people, and especially me, to be honest. And I find it difficult to keep a schedule, which is why I don't collaborate as much these days. But a few years ago, we were collaborating, me and G-Man. The videos are still up. But yeah, because I can't keep a schedule, or my schedule's all over the place, that's why it's difficult for me to actually collaborate with people, because I don't want to end up disappointing people and canceling. And also, when I used to collaborate with G-Man, I would like spring a live stream collaboration on G-Man, an hour or half an hour before. And it's just not practical, do you know what I mean? So I think G-Man had to turn me down a couple times because I just would like spring it on him. Like, are you ready to go live in half an hour? And he's like, no, I'm out actually. So yeah. But big up Ryan for the super chat. Yeah, me and G-Man did used to collaborate, and we still chat in my Element group and whatnot. And I watch his videos. Him and Ade are doing great stuff. So yeah, big up G-Man every time. Big up Supersized Fries. He says, is Tank top 10 wasted talent in boxing history? That's a good question, Supersized Fries. I don't want to say top 10 wasted talent in boxing history, because there's been a lot of wasted talents, but definitely top 10 wasted talent, let's say in the past 25 years. Yeah. Very frustrating, because not only is Tank very talented, he's also an entertaining fighter because he's a knockout puncher. And yeah, he's just all about the money. We get it, it's prize fighting. But one of the things that makes prize fighting interesting for fans is the macho aspect of it. Like fighters wanting to prove that they're the best, not just fighters maneuvering around like businessmen. I mean, these days, a lot of fighters are almost, see, back in the days, managers used to be mouthpieces for the fighter. But these days, it's like the fighters themselves are doing the manager's job, like openly. You know what I mean? They're avoiding this and avoiding that and maximizing their income here by avoiding that fight and taking an easier fight for more money and all this type of business. And it is a business, but as fans, we want to see the best fight the best. That's why we pay our money. Yeah? We pay our money to see guys who think they're the best go out there and try and prove it. Tank Davis was never willing to do that. As talented as he's always been, he was just never willing to go out there and prove he was the best. And that's why it's disappointing. Big up Paul for the super chat. He says, big up, long-time listener here. Have you watched the TV series called Fringe? As in Fringe Science? For me, it's up there with the X-Files. It's so very layered with so many different topics covered. I haven't seen it. In fact, let me look it up now. I doubt it will capture me the way the X-Files did, but I'll give it a go. Let me have a look here. Because me, I really don't watch that many series. I've been watching more than I used to, but I'm still not like a serial series watcher. Okay, so it came out in 2008. There was 5 seasons. American science fiction. I'm glad it's an American science fiction thing because honestly, most of the UK series I find to be absolutely diabolically bad. I know other people like them, and I like a lot of UK TV programs from back in the days, sitcoms and whatnot. But over the past 10, 15, 20 years, when it comes to TV series, I don't think there's anything from the UK that I liked. I thought Supercell was trash. I tried watching it. I thought it was awful. I didn't like Black Mirror at all. I watched a few episodes of that and I was just like, the acting is so wooden and horrible and the way the characters behave is weird and it just, didn't do it for me. So I'm glad this is an American series. I'm just reading about it here. Okay, so it's created by J.J. Abrams. Was J.J. Abrams, he did like the Star Trek movie, right? Didn't he do one of the Star Trek movies? I'm not like a massive fan of J.J. Abrams, to be honest. I'm not really a fan of his work. Let's see here. I'm going through J.J. Abrams' filmography to remind me other stuff that he did. Okay, he did Armageddon. That movie was okay, right? That had, was Liv Tyler in that and a few others? That movie was okay. Yeah, Star Trek, he did that. All right. Yeah, I'm looking at his filmography. I'm not really a fan of J.J. Abrams stuff, to be honest. Did he do TV stuff as well? Let me have a look here. Television. Okay, yeah, I thought he did Lost. Yeah, he did Lost. I was never a fan of Lost, so I'll give it a go. But I've never been captured by the tone of J.J. Abrams movies and TV series. Do you know what I mean? Just doesn't do it for me somehow. But I'll definitely give it a go because I do love sci-fi. So shout out to Paul for the super chat. I will check it out. Mark Hatch says, Hatman, do you think G-Man made a mistake changing his name? Time will tell, but no, I'm going to say he didn't make a mistake. No, he didn't make a mistake. I don't think he made a mistake. Shout out to Danny. Buenas noches. Big up Matt. He says, Spartacus was good. You saw every babe's hoo-ha's. Okay, big up Matt. Shout out to Charles B in the chat. What do you think about Tank Supersized Fries? Do you think he's a top 10 of all time wasted talent? Okay, Movie Magic says, have you covered the Telly Swift situation? Well, I don't want to talk too much about Deontay's private life and all that kind of stuff on this platform. I don't tend to do that here on YouTube. You know, we talked a little bit about Richard Riakpo yesterday, but, you know, for bants. As far as Wilder goes, I mean, rather than talking specifically about Wilder, what I'll say is that I don't understand why so many of these rich, successful men, particularly in America, but to some extent even in the UK, end up shacking up with women with a questionable character. I don't get it. I mean, for one, if you're a rich man, yeah, why are you hooking up with a woman who is a single mother? Not that she is necessarily a bad person because she's a single mother, but when you're rich, you've got the pick of the bunch. You don't have to take a woman who's got someone else's child. Do you know what I mean? So why do it at all? Because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to benefit from that situation. If you and that person break up, you've then built a bond with a young person, which is basically going to be broken once you and the mother break up. You know? So I don't understand why they do that, and I don't understand why they hook up with these women who are so obviously covered in red flags. There's a saying which I like, and it pertains to dating in the modern world. When you see these women who are covered in tattoos like that, graffiti is the sign of a bad neighborhood. All right? Let me repeat that. Graffiti is the sign of a bad neighborhood. We got Matt Borges, and he says, okay, yeah, read that one. Shout out to James Clifford. He says, on science fiction, The Expanse is highly rated. I am watching it for the first time. I was told about it eons ago. Wish I watched it sooner on Prime. Okay, let me look up The Expanse right now. So got a few things to watch. Let me look up The Expanse here. Okay, it's a series rather than a movie. I do prefer movies, just first and foremost because of time constraints, but also because series tend to be full of filler, excuse me. So The Expanse is an American science fiction television series that premiered on December 14th, okay, 2015 on Sci-Fi. Okay, you got 6 seasons, between 6 and 13 episodes per season. All right. That's another thing for me to try and check out on Prime. Big up James Clifford every time. Jupiter String says some men have a savior complex, Hatman. Well, that's an interesting... Okay, big up Charles B. He says, the thing with Black Mirror, each episode is essentially a standalone film with its own director, writer, production team, so it would vary in quality. Some were good, some were shockingly bad. Okay, I didn't know that. I did not know that. The X-Files used to have some different directors for certain episodes, but the whole thing was overseen by the same producer, and Chris Carter, the creator, also wrote many of the episodes, and he kind of oversaw everything as well. So although Chris Carter didn't write every episode and it wasn't directed by the same guy every time, it had the same people, you know, making sure that there was continuity of tone and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? And obviously the writers were always high quality and what have you. But yeah, as far as some men having a savior complex. Here's the thing, right? As men, most men, I can't speak for all men, but most of us have a natural desire to protect and provide. Okay, we just have that built into us, most men. We actually want to protect and provide. But in order for that protector-provider instinct to kick in, a woman has to look like she needs to be protected and provided for. She needs to be giving off those kind of vibes, right? If a woman is giving off the kind of vibes like, I don't need no man, she's acting super cocky and arrogant and confident and strutting around like a male peacock, my whole thing is, well, I don't feel the urge to protect you or provide for you because you're acting like you don't need me. Does that make sense? So when I'm looking at some of these women that these guys are picking, these are women who are already making their own money. They're already doing their own thing. They're all up on the gram. They're advertising their success and all this type of business. And for one, a woman who's always on social media like that, that's a red flag, bro. If she's some kind of social media vixen or however they describe social media baddie, that's a red flag. That's not wife. But this is the problem. Look, and I'm not talking about Deontay Wilder here. I've got no idea about his mother. Maybe his mother's an amazing woman. I'm just talking in general, okay? Unfortunately, a lot of these guys who end up making these horrendous choices when they're rich and they've got the pick of the bunch, but they end up picking these ratchet women, it's because they were raised by women like that. So some of them have got this kind of, do you want to call it Stockholm syndrome? But they're raised by like low grade, low quality women. So they don't know any better. You know, they gravitate towards what seems familiar to them. It's kind of like Freud, you know, one of the first things in psychology that they teach you about Freud. Well, do they even teach you about Freud anymore? When I studied psychology, they start teaching you about Freud and Carl Jung and all that. And one of Freud's theories is that men, not all men, but a lot of men, most men in his opinion, seek out spouses, girlfriends who remind them of their mother. Yeah, that's one of Freud's theories. It's that boys and men will seek out girlfriends and wives who remind them of their mother. And if your mother was some low-grade, ratchet individual, even though it seems counterintuitive, you might go out and seek something like that in some cases. Big up President Brush. King James says those women are master manipulators. Big up Galaxy Edits. Big up Paul, he says, loved the X-Files, loved Fringe, and Firefly was okay. Big up Jazz, he says, big up, look up Dark, Hatman. Great German sci-fi, thought it was good. Yeah, I actually tried to watch Dark, but I did find it a bit difficult with the subtitles, and I've watched stuff with subtitles before, do you know what I mean? Dubbed, obviously it's dubbed anyway. I watched Squid Game, and I thought season 1 of Squid Game was very enjoyable. That's obviously dubbed and it's got subtitles and everything, but I don't know, I tried to watch Dark and was the dubbing putting me off or something? I don't know what it was. I'm very picky, as you guys can see. I'm very fussy and picky when it comes to TV shows and movies. I'm very, very fussy and picky. Especially, I'm more fussy with series than I am with movies. Because again, a series goes on for many, many episodes. A movie can be over in 90 minutes. So I don't tend to be as fussy with movies, but with series, I tend to be like real fussy because if I start off on the first episode and I'm not instantly gripped, then I'm like, can I really get through several seasons of this? You know, I ain't got time. I'm sure it's a great show, Dark, right? A lot of people have said good things about it, but yeah, I'm just kind of a fussy person with movies and series, but particularly series. Disgruntled Buddha says X-Files and Black Mirror aren't in the same league. That episode in the forest with the green bugs lives in my mind. Yeah, that was in season 1. I can't remember what that episode was called of the X-Files, but I did like that episode too. But the thing that really carried the X-Files was the fantastic writing. Honestly, the X-Files has got some of the best writing of any TV series in history. The writing was sharp, it was witty, it was informative. Like, they literally educated you in the X-Files about loads of stuff that happened in American history and even global history that you didn't know about. Yeah? In the X-Files, they talked about Operation Paperclip. They talked about MK Ultra, all of this stuff before most people even knew about those things, okay? Because you're going back to like the 1970s and 1940s, 50s, all that type of stuff, as far as the references they were making in the X-Files, you know? And the X-Files was also very prophetic in terms of showing things that would happen in real life later. So yeah, it was informative, but the core of the X-Files really was the writing and the chemistry between Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny. The on-screen chemistry was just elite. And the writing, like David Duchovny's character, Mulder, always had the funniest one-liners, like constantly. They'd always be hitting you with these like sarcastic and witty one-liners all the time. And that really helped it, you know? Like, if you tried to do the X-Files with a pair of actors that didn't have that type of chemistry and with writers who weren't that humorous, I probably wouldn't have liked the X-Files half as much as I did. But it's that chemistry and that writing that carried it. The concepts they were exploring were very interesting too, right? But that type of material has to be in the right hands. And it definitely was with the X-Files. Big up Brian, he says, did you like Inglourious Basterds, the film? Haven't actually seen it. I'm aware of it, and I know what the concept is about. It's a Tarantino film about a bunch of, I guess, Jewish soldiers during World War II who went around, you know, taking down the Third Reich. I guess that's what the premise of it. I think I've seen a few minutes of the movie, but I never watched it all the way through. Did Tarantino fully direct it, or was he just producer or executive producer or something? But he had something to do with it, right? And Tarantino's very hit and miss with his movies. One of my favorite movies of all time is Pulp Fiction. To me, I still think that's his best ever film. But the rest of his films are like, you know, some of them are cool. Others are just like, eh. Because when Pulp Fiction came out, it was a game changer. It totally changed the way that people made gangster movies. It totally changed it. And so if someone was to watch Pulp Fiction now, it might not have the same, you know, for the first time, it might not have the same impact on them, because the changes that Pulp Fiction inspired have now become ubiquitous. Yeah, it's normal to watch a gangster movie now and see a pair of gangsters doing normal stuff, having chit chat and talking about burgers and foot massages and all that type of business. But before Pulp Fiction, you did not see that in gangster movies. So it was like a novel thing. It totally changed the game as far as those type of films. Big up Striker. Jupiter String says Tarantino is crude. Yeah. But sometimes his way just works. There are a lot of people that like Jackie Brown. I thought Jackie Brown was cool. I wasn't in love. I've never been in love with that movie. It's cool. You know, they had some interesting characters in there. Samuel L. Jackson's always good value for money. And his character was funny. De Niro's character was odd, but he played it well. So, Jackie Brown's not a bad movie. It didn't grip me the way that Pulp Fiction did. Let's just put it that way. Supersized Fry says, check out this new Jackie Chan movie called Shadow's Edge. It was very good. Disgruntled Buddha says, it was a shame when Mulder left for a bit and T-1000 was in, but I grew to like him. Yeah, T-1000, whatever that actor is called. Yeah, it was disappointing when Mulder left and he came in. He was never able to carry the show the way Mulder did. Not like Mulder was carrying it alone. He and Gillian Anderson were fantastic together. But T-1000's female partner wasn't anywhere close to up to the standard of Gillian Anderson. Not even remotely close. T-1000 was actually not too bad as a character. He wasn't any real replacement for Mulder, but he was not too bad. Or like after a few episodes, you were like, okay, he has something about him. Kylie says, didn't really like Jackie Brown. The best thing about that film is the Randy Crawford soundtrack. Big up HA. Have I seen the movie City of God? Yes, I have. Watched it back in the days. That's like a Brazilian slum favela movie. So yes, I have seen City of God. It was a very big deal back in the days. But I'll tell you a movie which is very similar to City of God, which I actually preferred. It's a South African movie called Tsotsi. I think it's spelled T-S-O-I-T-S-I. God, I forget the spelling now, but yeah, it's called Tsotsi. And I actually preferred that movie to City of God for whatever reason. Most people probably won't, but I preferred Tsotsi. It's a very similar movie. Jupiter String says, do I like House? You mean the movie? The movie, what am I talking about? You mean the music? The music genre House? Rusby says Django great too. Django is okay. Again, I wasn't really blown away by it. The thing that I think turns a lot of people off Tarantino movies is he has this like vein of teenage, how can I even describe it? A lot of his movies seem like they're catering to teenage boys. And here we have Tarantino, what is he, in his 60s? And he's still making movies which seem like they're catering to teenage boys or something. It's like, I don't know, man. And I guess the movies that I liked most of Tarantino's were the ones that didn't seem like they were catering to teenage boys as much. Shout out to everyone locked in the live chat. I'm just going to refresh my tab here in case we're frozen. Not seeing any new messages coming in, so let me just refresh this. All right, here we go. Oh, House, the MD series with Hugh Laurie. Never really got into it, but I always quite liked Hugh Laurie as an actor. Even on British TV, I always found him quite interesting, and his voice and his mannerisms and all that were quite amusing. I remember him from that comedy show with Stephen Fry. It's called Fry and Laurie. So I always quite liked Hugh Laurie, but yeah, I never got into House, the TV show. He plays a doctor. I'm aware of it. I maybe saw an episode or two, but medical dramas aren't really my thing. So I was never a fan of ER or, them kind of medical shows. Faultline says, do you have a favorite horror movie? Horror is not really my genre. I do watch horror movies from time to time. I saw the new 28 Years Later movie, for example. So, I like horror movies that make me laugh. I'm not like a sadistic person that likes the most demonic and sadistic horror. I just like silly horror that makes me laugh. So I tend to prefer horror movies that are to do with supernatural things, because supernatural stuff generally makes me laugh. You know what I mean? When like a demon witch comes out or something like that, I just crack up laughing. I don't tend to go for like really grisly, real world horror as much, like stuff like, what is it now, Hostel, and I'm like, nah, bro, that's not for me. Whereas like supernatural horror, I can find it funny and laugh all the way through it. My favorite horror movie last year was Final Destination Bloodlines. I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, Jeepers Creepers is a good example of the kind of horror that I like. Jeepers Creepers was like ridiculous, Again, it had all the typical horror movie tropes with characters that act stupid and go towards the danger when they shouldn't. When there's an easy escape route, they don't choose to take it. So yeah, I did like Jeepers Creepers. Roz B says, by definition, they aren't horror movies then. Well, they're billed as horror movies. So I'm not sure what else to call them. Horror movies or comedy horror. However you want to describe them. Maybe you could describe them as comedy horror. Free Coffee Guy says, I couldn't stop laughing at Bloodlines. Yeah, it was hilarious, bro. And as was said there, maybe that's what it was designed to do. Maybe it's designed to make us laugh. But there are certain supernatural horror movies which I don't think are designed to make you laugh, but they make me laugh all the same. Big up James Clifford for the super chat. He says, in the X-Files, Mulder talks about being open to possibilities. Do you think that is where you picked up the phrase? And do you think it has influenced your content creation or curiosity as a young man? No, I don't think that's where I picked up the phrase. And did it influence my curiosity? Well, I was into stuff like that before the X-Files came along, which is why I was so taken by the X-Files, because it literally ticked all the boxes. So growing up as a kid, I was always interested in space. Like, I used to ask my parents a million questions about space and space travel and all that type of stuff. So I was fascinated by like spaceships and the stars and different planets and the possibility of life and other. So I was already interested in all that kind of stuff. On top of that, I was interested in mysticism. So even though I was never religious, I didn't come from a religious family, as far as my immediate family, not religious. I was always very interested in like biblical tales and biblical epics. Back in the days, in the late 80s and the early 90s, they would often play these biblical epics on TV in the UK on a Sunday. And I always loved them biblical epics. And a lot of those fantasy movies, like Jason and the Argonauts and stuff like that. So anything unusual, thought-provoking, anything to do with space, mysteries, basically. Ever since I was a little kid, I was always intrigued by the mysteries of life and the mysteries of creation and, all that kind of thing. I used to like watching a lot of even mainstream stuff as a kid, as far as documentaries about the cosmos. There was, what's his name now? The old man that did Games Master. He used to do shows sometimes about the cosmos, narrating. What's the old guy, the old geezer with the monocle who did Games Master? What's his name? Can anybody jog my memory? What's the old guy's name with the monocle? Patrick Moore. Yeah, Patrick Moore. So I used to watch like Patrick Moore programs. Anything thought-provoking would grabbed my attention as a kid. Big up James Clifford for the super chat. So yeah, I wouldn't say that the X-Files really influenced my content creation, but I would say that it definitely added fuel to the fire, because I was already a very intrepid kid, you know, before the X-Files. That's why I loved it so much. I was totally addicted to it, and I watched. At the same time, there was The Lone Gunman. There was also The Outer Limits. The Outer Limits was on during the 1990s. I think the original Outer Limits came out in the 60s or something, but the reprised Outer Limits came out around the same time as the X-Files. And I used to watch the Outer Limits as well. Sometimes I watch an X-Files episode. I think the Outer Limits was actually on after the X-Files for a certain period. So I'd watch my weekly episode of the X-Files and then go straight into the Outer Limits episode. Oh wow, James Clifford said, I only just started watching the X-Files this month. Love the animation in Jason and the Argonauts. The skeletons coming out of the ground were fun. Have a great weekend, everyone, and big up James Clifford. Much appreciated, my bro. Yeah, I always liked Jason and the Argonauts. With the stop animation, the giant statues that would come to life, the skeletons, Medusa, and all that stuff. So yeah, I like Jason and the Argonauts. Faultline says the original Hebrew Bible has what is called skip codes in them. Pretty interesting. They never found anything like it in any other book in the world. Encircled says, why are Johnny Fisher fans so defensive when you point out how bad he is? What can I say? Maybe they're drunk. I don't know. Maybe they know him personally, because Johnny Fisher is someone that is very loved in Essex. People, even if he didn't grow up with them, many of the people that support him have actually met him. He sells tickets. You know, his dad will sell tickets and whatnot. So a lot of them actually have met either Johnny himself or the family. And they're a tight-knit community down there in Romford. You know what I mean? So that's probably why. Faultline says they let objectivity go out the window because they get emotionally involved and talk some nonsense. But that's probably the majority of people that watch boxing. Not hardcore fans necessarily, but you know, certainly the casuals. That's the majority of the casuals. The majority of casuals are like that. Big up Brad H for the super chat. No comment on that, just the super chat, much appreciated. I mean, even one of the worst backlashes I ever got over the past 4 or 5 years was from Fabio Wardley fans, believe it or not. I've never been someone that has been like critical of Fabio Wardley's character. I've never made a video, you know, saying that Wardley's ducked someone, or, you know, or Wardley ducks fights, or Wardley's not a real fighter, or, you know, I've never gone in on Wardley like that because he hasn't given me any reason to. What I have done is I've picked against him several times because of the lack of amateur background combined with getting hit a lot in many of his fights. But I never picked against him because I disliked him or was wishing bad upon him. It was just an objective prediction based upon what I saw. Now, obviously I was wrong. Fabio Wardley's still undefeated, but it wasn't anything personal. Like, seriously, there's going to be none of you guys who have ever thought that I've got anything against Fabio Wardley. You know what I mean? Like, Fabio's great. But I don't know, he proved me wrong, and good for him. But when I picked against him, I think it was for the Adelaide fight, the backlash was crazy. Like, the backlash was so mad. There were people flagging my videos and doing all sorts of dirty tactics to try and damage my channel, trolling me in the comments. It's unbelievable. It was way overboard. I mean, if it was like, Fury fans, I could understand, because I go in on Fury. I mean, I think I'm justified going in on him, but I can see why it would get the Fury fanboys mad, right? Because I'm always going in on him. But with Wardley, I've never gone in on Wardley. Like, ever. I have never gone in on Fabio Wardley. Eldon Joe says it was a bad pick. Well, yeah, evidently Wardley won, but it wasn't a pick that I made out of malice. Like, if someone makes a wrong prediction, why would you go in on me and start attacking me and trying to sabotage my channel because I got a prediction? It doesn't even make sense. Like, what's all that about? If you make a prediction just based on who you think is going to win, like, there's no need for people to be getting upset and, trying to take your channel down. And weird, man. But then somebody explained to me later on that most of Wardley's fans are football fans. And that's when it made sense. I was like, oh, okay. Most of them are basically not really boxing fans. They're just Ipswich Town fans. That's why they were behaving in such a bizarre fashion. It's like the football fan mentality transposed into boxing. Okay, now it makes sense. It's still stupid, but it makes sense now, because football fans have got a hyper tribal mindset. Oh, excuse me, Chili Beef says Medusa was Clash of the Titans. There's me getting my old school mythological movies mixed up. Okay, Clash of the Titans. I didn't like the remake Clash of the Titans with Liam Neeson. But yeah, the old school Clash of the Titans with the stop motion animation. Yeah, I'm all about that. Star Fox says they are all from Ipswich. It's understandable. I'd be pissed 24/7 if I was from there too. Faultline says, I remember when Joshua had his first loss to Ruiz and people were commenting stuff on your videos like, can't wait until AJ Fanboy makes a new vid. And the funny thing is, right, I was actually giving Ruiz a decent chance of winning, but the people who were turning up to gloat, most of them were picking AJ to win easy and they were mocking it as a joke fight. So that's the irony of it, right? And an even bigger irony is the way that I get accused of being both an AJ fanboy and an AJ hater. These days in equal measure. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, there was a guy who literally showed up in the comment section after one of my live streams, and he was saying, you hate Anthony Joshua, you're always talking bad about Anthony Joshua, this, that, and the other. Oh my God. And on many videos in the past, there would be people in the same comment section who would accuse me of being an AJ fanboy and an AJ hater, a Fury fanboy and a Fury hater, believe it or not. Incredible. Brad says, have you ever been knocked out? No, I've never been knocked out. Faultline says, aesthetically, Ruiz does look like a joke, but he can fight. Yeah, and I was very close to actually picking Jarrell Miller to beat AJ in the run-up to that fight. I was saying constantly, this is a dangerous fight for AJ, and if he can't hurt Miller, like if Miller can take his power, AJ's in serious trouble in this fight. Obviously, Miller ended up failing the test, so, he didn't go ahead. And to be fair, I didn't see Ruiz being as dangerous for AJ as Miller, but I still saw him as a dangerous opponent because of the hand speed and the combination punching, and because of the issues that AJ had in his fight before against Povetkin. Yeah, Povetkin rocked AJ in the first round, bloodied his nose, and for a couple rounds he was countering AJ very well with hooks and whatnot. So that was the context, right? And so I thought, this Ruiz guy's got very quick hands. I'd seen him knock people out and what have you, and I thought, this is a dangerous fight, you know? Like, this is actually a dangerous fight for Anthony Joshua. I didn't pick Ruiz to pull off the upset, but I did think it would be dangerous, and I had a feeling that Ruiz was going to win, which I've spoken about many times before, but obviously a feeling is not the same as doing a public prediction, because me and my girlfriend at the time were both saying to each other, we can sense there's going to be an upset here. Something's going to happen. We need to put a bet on. And we were kicking ourselves, when AJ got dropped in the third round, like, oh my days, we should have put that bet on. We could just sense that something was going to happen in this fight. Wow, that's an interesting one from Encircled. He says, I hate the culture of toxic positivity where you have to love everything or everyone. That culture is more of a British thing. Have you noticed that? It's like a British thing. Because in America, you don't really have that. But in Britain, it's like, yeah, you're not allowed to even pick against someone if that's what you objectively believe. It's not like you want them to lose. You just don't think they're going to win. And then you get all of these people turning up in the comment section saying, this is a disgrace. You should be getting behind him. Yeah, that's not what my channel's about, bro. my channel is about picking who I think is going to win, irrespective of who I want to win. Yeah, but apparently there's a lot of people out there that don't have the ability to pick based on who they objectively think is going to win. It's always wishful thinking. Casa says, I feel like Dwyer tipped Ruiz in that fight. Yeah, he might have done, actually. Dwyer has made some fantastic predictions over the years. He's also made some terrible ones because he does pick underdogs a disproportionate number of times. Like a disproportionate percentage of the time, Dwyer's picking the underdog. But, as he says, he's giving gambling advice first and foremost. So if you're giving gambling advice, you are going to be picking the underdog more often than most people because you're trying to beat the casino, right? You're trying to make a profit. And if you're always betting on favorites, it's more difficult to make money. Who's my favorite heavyweight right now, objectivity aside? My favorite heavyweight right now probably is Usyk. So yeah, he's the best, and he's also my favorite right now. I just like his performances, particularly his last performance against Dubois. I thought that was very entertaining. So I'll probably say Usyk. And closely followed by Atama. I like Atama's performances. I would put Atama above Usyk if it weren't for the fact that Atama hasn't fought good quality opposition yet. That's the thing. Yeah, the performances are explosive and exciting, but they're kind of expected, Whereas Usyk has gone in there against Dubois in the rematch, and he's chinned him in, 5 rounds? And he properly chinned him this time. So, I'll probably say Usyk right now. Atomistic Intellect says, do you think Luke Partridge is a normie or divergent? Luke Partridge is not a normie. He is divergent, but just because someone is divergent, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily a good, honest genuine-hearted person. There are plenty of divergents who are actually sinister individuals. I'm not saying Fury is particularly sinister. I don't think he is. But within the context of boxing, you know, he's pretty insufferable. But no, I don't think Partridge is a normie at all. Like, not at all. Star Fox says, every time someone misspells Hatman, I think of the TV show Heartbeat. What was the TV show Heartbeat about? I just remember the theme song. Heartbeat, why do you miss? Why do you skip every time my baby misses me or kisses me? I forget how the lyrics go. But I remember the theme song. But what was the show actually about, Heartbeat? Big up Joey says, what did you make of the T.O. Shakur face-off? Well, the first thing about the T.O. Shakur face-off was the fact that Shakur looked taller. He looked the taller of the two. And for me, that's significant. People are comparing Shakur Stevenson to Lomachenko. They're saying, well, you know, Stevenson's a southpaw, but so was Lomachenko. And he's slicker than Stevenson, or just as slick, and T.O. beat him. First of all, I don't think Lomachenko is anywhere near as slick as Shakur Stevenson at all. Lomachenko wasn't a particularly slick southpaw. He was a high-volume southpaw with very creative offense and creative footwork. But he was never like a Pernell Whitaker slick star. That was never Lomachenko's game. He wasn't that hard to hit. Not like he had bad defense. He didn't have bad defense, but he was never a Pernell Whitaker type fighter. He was aggressive, throwing lots of shots, stepping around, and, you know, getting combinations off. Just very, very creative with his footwork and with his offense. So a very different kind of fighter to Shakur Stevenson, who's more of a pure boxer. Far less aggressive, much taller than Lomachenko, longer arms, more rangy, more of a counter puncher, doesn't lead off as much as Lomachenko. So yeah, they're both southpaws, but they're very, very different in the way they approach boxing. Because Lomachenko is aggressive and because he had such short arms relative to T.O., that's why T.O. was able to control him on the outside the way he did, because Lomachenko, let's be real, was intimidated by T.O.'s power when he was fresh early. He was intimidated. And that's why he couldn't, or he wasn't willing to, step in the pocket and throw the kind of shots we would normally see from him. Shakur Stevenson is much more rangy. So I think it will be more difficult for T.O. to keep Shakur Stevenson frozen on the outside like that. You know, Stevenson's got long arms and he can get to you with the jab and the backhand, and he's good at fiddling his way through fights, Stevenson. Obviously in his last fight, it was a lot more, his last couple have been a lot more kind of action-packed, but certainly there's a Peter fight, but Stevenson generally will fiddle his way through fights. That's usually how he goes about it. He's good at fiddling his way through. And that is not Lomachenko at all. When did you ever see Lomachenko fiddle his way through a fight? You know what I mean? So it's a totally different equation for Teofimo Lopez to try and solve here. Big up Ali, he says Loma's back foot game was pretty average. In Circle says Loma was more like Pacquiao. Yeah, he was more like Pacquiao, but Loma was a lot more advanced than Pacquiao as far as creative offense and footwork. But yeah, more like Pacquiao than he is like Stevenson for sure. Yeah, he's definitely closer to a Pacquiao type fighter than a Stevenson type fighter. Yeah, definitely. Not just in terms of style, but also dimensions. You know, Pacquiao, a shorter guy like Lomachenko. Stevenson, taller, more rangy. If you're going to compare Stevenson to any of the southpaws that Tio has fought in the past, the closest stylistically might be a Sandor Martin. It's not, like for like. Sandor Martin's more of an out-and-out mover, but that would be a more relevant comparison, in my opinion, because of the fact that the dimensions are similar, And Sandor Martin's trying to box you. He's not trying to get involved. He's not trying to crash the pocket and throw loads of shots at you the way that Lomachenko does. And it's the same with Stevenson. Stevenson is trying to stay out your way most of the time. Sports fan says, I always thought Loma let himself down massively in that fight. He dominated those last 4 rounds, started way too late. But why did he start too late? I don't think Loma was, miscalculated anything. I think Loma started late because he sensed that Tio didn't have the same type of power in his right hand anymore. And that his reflexes weren't as sharp. And once he noticed the power was diminishing on the right hand and that Tio wasn't as sharp, that's when he started being aggressive. He started being aggressive when he felt it was safe to be aggressive. Early in the fight, he didn't feel it was safe to be aggressive. That's why he was so low volume compared to what we're used to. In Circle says, no way Usyk would have sat back and let himself lose like that. Well, completely agree. But evidently, Usyk is a tougher man, mentally than Lomachenko. Usyk was more used to fighting bigger guys. Okay. Tony's having a laugh here. He says, I noticed on the February 1st Zuffa boxing card, your favorite heavyweight prospect, Damazion Van Houten, is on there. And then Circle says, so Van Houten is crap and stupid. I wish Van Houten all the luck in the world. He's going to need it. That's all I can tell you about that young man. I wish him all the luck in the world. He's going to need it. Connor Williams says, who you got in this Keyshawn Davis, Jermaine Ortiz fight? I'm going to go for Keyshawn Davis to win. But Ortiz, we saw against Tio that he can do his thing. But if it's, I'm anticipating maybe a bit of a fiddly fight. Ortiz could pull off an upset, but I think he'll need to do quite a lot to pull off the upset because Davis is the money in the room. And unfortunately, boxing politics plays a part in decisions and the way fights go and all that kind of thing. We know that. So I'm going to go with Keyshawn Davis to win. Whether he deserves it or not might be another matter, but I'm going to say Keyshawn Davis. Striker says, every time I hear that Van Houten guy's name, I think of Millhouse. Star Fox says, isn't Van Houten that chick from the Big Breakfast Show from the 90s? That was Denise Van Houten, but yeah, the surname is very similar. Denise Van Houten. Speaking of chemistry, I was saying that Mulder and Scully's chemistry was legendary in the X-Files. Johnny Vaughn and Denise Van Houten's chemistry was legendary on The Big Breakfast. Black Dynamite says Tio will have a chance if he can turn it into a high volume fight. Well, here's the way I see it actually, right? I'm picking Stevenson to win. I want to be as clear about that as possible. I'm picking Stevenson to win, but I can certainly see a way for Tio to win, and I can certainly see scenarios where he can win. And what I'll say is this. If Teofimo Lopez is in control of this fight after 4 rounds, he'll go on to win. I think that the winner of this fight will be decided inside the first 4 rounds. Whoever can get off to the best start and control the action, I think is going to go on to win the fight. If Stevenson is in control after 4 rounds, Tio might be able to come back at him for certain periods during the fight. But I think Stevenson will then adjust and go on to a points victory. But if Lopez is the one who's ahead and in control after 4 rounds, I think he's got it at that point. And the reason I say that is because Lopez is very athletic, he's explosive, he's fast, and Stevenson's never been in there with someone as athletic and fast, in my opinion, as Lopez. How he copes with that speed and athleticism and explosiveness of Lopez is crucial as far as how this fight goes. Because I do think that Stevenson is the technically better fighter. He's more smart, he's just more technically refined and better in that way. But sometimes you come up against a guy who's technically good, maybe not quite as good as you, but technically good. But they're so athletic that the athleticism not only compensates and bridges the gap as far as technical ability, but it supersedes you. I mean, Roy Jones, obviously this is an extreme example, but Roy Jones was technically very flawed, but he beat loads of people that were way better technically than himself. Okay, James Toney, Bernard Hopkins, Mike McCallum, the list goes on and on. Teofimo Lopez is better technically than Roy Jones, and he's not as great an athlete as Roy Jones pound for pound, but the principle applies here, okay? If Tio's athleticism is just a bit too much for Stevenson, it will show in the early rounds. It will show in the first 4 rounds if that athleticism is just going to be too much for Stevenson. If the athleticism isn't too much for Stevenson, Stevenson's going to win the fight. Yeah, if it comes down to who's got the better technique, Stevenson's going to win the fight. But if Tio can surprise him and throw him off with that explosive athleticism, he'll probably win. I'm going with the idea that it will come down to technique rather than athleticism, and Stevenson will get it done on points. Yeah, that's a good comparison actually, Rusby. Haney versus Garcia. Haney was technically better and they knew each other from the amateurs like these two do. Yeah, that's an example of it. That's an example of a guy with superior athleticism beating someone with superior technique. Yeah. Ryan Garcia, the superior athleticism, superior power, beat the guy who was more technically proficient. But for me, I don't think the athleticism gap is as big in this fight as it was with Ryan Garcia and Haney. And I think the technique gap is bigger. Yeah, maybe that's controversial, but I do think that Stevenson is a lot better technically than Tio Lopez. In terms of the technical stuff that he can do, I think he's more advanced. Yeah, we've seen Lopez outboxed a number of times. So we've never seen Stevenson outboxed. Some people have swarmed him, maybe outworked him, but no one's outboxed him. Shout out to Ryan for the super chat. He says, what's the Happy Caribbean song at the start of your streams? Also, if I miss your live, I put headphones on. It gets me through my shift. Big up, Ryan. It's actually a song or a track from the YouTube audio library. Let me try and look it up. A second here. The track is called, and you can, anyone who's got a YouTube account can look up this track and download it. It is only from the YouTube audio library. Where is it now? I think it's called Mission Dub. So if you go to the YouTube audio library and look up Mission Dub, I think that's what it's called. I'm just looking through my folder here to try and find the actual track. Where is it now? Just give me a second. Yeah, it's called Mission Dub. The track is called Mission Dub. All right, so look it up in the YouTube audio library. You'll find it there. It's royalty free, so anyone who makes content on YouTube, you can use that for your own videos or whatever the case may be. Mission Dub. Big up Ryan for the super chat. So Vader says, Stevenson Tiafimo has the potential to be a card full of stinkers, a lot of negative styles. The Zuffa show on Sunday looks more entertaining. Well-matched fights. Boachuk versus Batayev will be a banger. We'll see. Sometimes fights do look like they're going to be stinkers on paper and turn out to be barn burners, and vice versa. Sometimes a fight looks like it's going to be a classic on paper and it turns out to be a stinker. So we'll find out in due course. Big up Ryan for the super chat. He says, I find it relaxing to listen to. And me too. So I picked well then when it comes to the background music for these streams. Danny says, Hatman, I can't believe you don't find T.O. funny. I don't find him funny, like at all. As I said previously, I don't find any American boxer post Mayweather, and then that includes Mayweather himself, funny other than Jarrell Miller. I cannot think of an American boxer from the Mayweather era onwards that was actually funny, other than Miller. That's it. I don't find Lopez funny at all. And Circle says, sometimes Wilder would say such deluded stuff that it was funny. Yeah, but then we're laughing at him rather than with him. And that was sometimes, British fighters, for whatever reason, are way more funny. Do you know what I mean? Like Dylan White's funny, Derek Chisora's funny, Carl Froch is funny, and Lawrence Okolie funny. Like British, for whatever reason, British fighters got all the banter. And as I say, I think it's because this current generation of American fighters, Mayweather onwards, they take themselves too seriously. When someone takes themselves too seriously, it's hard for them to be funny, Yeah, David Haye was funny too, indeed. There you go, another example of British fighters being funny. David Haye was funny. There are plenty of funny American fighters, but you have to go to the pre-Mayweather era to find the funny American fighters like Shannon Briggs, hilarious, obviously, and so many funny American fighters. James Toney at times was funny. Muhammad Ali, obviously, way back in the days in the 60s, 70s, was funny. Mike Tyson was funny. Mike Tyson was funny because he was just so wild. James Clifford mentioned Tony Thompson there with a wife in a wheelchair stuff. Was Tony Bellew funny? No, bro. Tony Bellew has never been funny. Charles says old Luke Partridge was funny. Yeah, Luke Partridge pre-Klitschko was funny. With the classic David Price, Tony Bellew interview. It'll take 10 plumbers to do you. God knows what that means. In fact, we need to put a pause on that. Waved says, I don't know how, but Adam Booth convinced by Josh Kelly is going to win this fight. He's a good talker. You mean he's convinced you? Yeah, Adam Booth's a great talker. And one of the reasons that Adam Booth is so convincing is because he's actually a sports psychologist. And he works a lot of that psychology on you when he's convincing you that these guys are going to win. You know, Adam Booth is very articulate and he's got a very good command of the human mind, you know. Yeah, Mitch Green's got to be one of the funniest American fighters of all time. Mitch Green was a whole comedy show. That's a fact. Dear, oh dear, Mitch Green. Mitch Green. Mitch Green was something else. Yeah, that's right. He used to call him Michelle Sissy Tyson and all that. Crazy. Mitch Green was literally like a WWE character in real life. Madness. Connor says that this weigh-in, Shakur had no shoes on, and Tio does, and Shakur still looks slightly taller. That's why I think it's kind of significant, you know? That's why I think the Lomachenko comparisons are just not valid, because Lomachenko's a little short guy with short arms. Stevenson's taller than Tio, or at least the same height, and he's got long arms. And he's not a volume puncher like Lomachenko. That's not his game. His game generally is fiddling his way through fights, pot-shotting and neutralizing your offense. That's his thing. Whereas Lomachenko's game is to overwhelm you. So they're two totally different fighters. The only similarity is that they both are moving up in weight and they're both southpaws. But there's more differences between Stevenson and Lomachenko than similarities. Charles B says Khan's got to be one of the funniest of all time. And that's a whole fact there from G-Man, Liam Goff. He says, the only thing Bellew's ever said that was funny was calling Frank Warren fish eyes. That's a whole fact. That was funny. And he must have got that from me. Because I was calling Frank Warren fish eyes regularly back then. So I can't think it was a coincidence. He must have got it from me, or someone he knows got it from me, and then he got it from them. Tony says, I find Daniel Dubois unintentionally funny. Even when he was wearing the Homer Simpson dad bod t-shirt, it just cracked me up. Bricktop, yep. I've been calling him Bricktop and Fish Eyes for years. And there's just no way that Guy Ritchie wasn't partly inspired. There's just no way that Frank Warren wasn't part of the inspiration for the character of Bricktop in Snatch. There's just no way. There's too many similarities, you know? I mean, Guy Ritchie even had Lenny McLean, Frank Warren's cousin, in Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. So he knew all about the Frank Warren backstory and everything. He would have heard even more of it from Lenny McLean when he worked with him on the movie. There's just no way that Guy Ritchie wasn't at least partly inspired by Frank Warren when he created that Bricktop character. Faultline says, Floyd learned a shoulder roll from Frank Warren. So Edmund says, genuine question. I agree Darren Barker lacks charisma, so why does he have a show with Proper where they are both trying to be funny? Why is Barker always trying to be a comedy podcaster? Proper Boxing, I don't know what his podcast is like, but his videos, right, his, pre-made videos that he uploads are funny. I don't know whether he writes the scripts for them himself or someone else writes them. Whatever the case may be, the end product is funny. It's witty, it's funny, it's got the little, London old school banter thing going on there, cheeky chappy stuff. It's funny. His formula, the formula that Proper Boxing has got for his videos is very, very good. From a humor perspective, it's very good. But I don't know what his podcast is like. Why has he got Darren Barker on there? Maybe he knows him personally. Maybe Darren Barker's a really cool person. And, some people are like that. When they know someone, they want to help him out, But, yeah, Darren Barker is literally a charisma vacuum. Ryan says comedy makes money. It does too. And that's why Proper Boxing's channel blew up as quickly as it did. Because he's funny. He had a great formula for writing the scripts and all that kind of stuff and the editing and, it's just catchy right away. And that's why he blew up like that. Big up Mr. Luca. He says Warren should respond with Triple D and Fabio Wardley. Fernie G says, do you consider yourself funny? I'm funny to some people, but do I consider myself like, a funny guy like that? Not really. I think I've become more funny the older I've gotten. When I first started YouTube, I don't think I was funny at all. But the older I've gotten, I think people find me more funny now. But I don't think that most people come here predominantly for the humor. I could be wrong. But as far as Mr. Luca's super chat there, Warren should respond with Triple D versus Fabio Wardley. Yeah, Warren may have put a hold on the Chisora Wilder fight, unfortunately, until he gets his cut, a cut that he's satisfied with, and it's going to be difficult because Chisora drives a hard bargain, so does Warren. And for Warren to respond with Triple D versus Wardley would be, well, fantastic. It's a much better fight than Chisora versus Wilder. Not that Chisora versus Wilder is a bad fight, but it's two old, middle-aged men. Shop-worn, who've seen better days. And even though at least one of them has got a lot of spirit left in him, as I say, they're both way past it. Whereas Wardley and Dubois is basically two guys in their primes, two guys who are not that hard to hit, two guys who hit very hard themselves. One of them is technically better than the other, but the other has got a bigger heart. So I'm all in. You know what I mean? It's an amazing fight. It's one of the best fights that can be made from a potential action perspective in the heavyweight division right now. Is Wardley Dubois. Maybe the best fight on paper as far as action will be Wardley Dubois. Oh, okay. Sorry, Mr. Luker. He says, I meant in response to Turkey. Okay. But I don't think Turkey's really watching what Warren is doing like that. I don't think he particularly cares. I don't think there's any way that Warren can tangibly get back at Turkey, you know? Turkey's got too much money and too much influence throughout the industry. That's someone Warren can't really do anything with. They're not on a level playing field, you know what I mean? Turkey's just on a completely different level because of the money he has access to. He's just on a totally different level. Martin says, you made up Luke Partridge, Hatman. That still makes me PMSL every time I hear it. Well, I was the first one to use Luke Partridge on YouTube, but I definitely didn't make that. I wasn't the first person to mention it on the internet because I got it from a forum. Yeah, I got that Luke Partridge name from a forum, from a guy claiming that the real name of the Fury family is actually Partridge. And in that forum post this was before the Klitschko fight, all right? It might have been a year or two before the Klitschko fight. I think anyway, in that forum post, he said that John Fury's real name is Johnny Partridge. And it's a very interesting post, by the way, very detailed, gave loads of backstory about John Fury's life and, you know, situations he's been involved in. And the guy said, I swear it's true, the family name is Partridge. It's not even Fury. And I want to say that I've heard Peter Fury actually mention this Partridge name before. I'm sure that it really rings a bell that Peter Fury, in one of those interviews he did back in the days, when he was talking about his family, he mentioned, we've also got partridges in our family. And he kind of laughed after saying it because it is, you know, a little bit of a funny name. But yeah, Luke Partridge is such a diabolical name. It makes me laugh every time I think of it. I'll literally be, you know, going about my day normally, and I think of the name Luke Partridge and it just cracks me up. $140 Bud versus Teodor Shakur. I got Bud winning both those fights. Big up Mr. Ray for the super chat. Yeah, I got Bud beating both those guys at 140. Okay, someone says Johnny Fisher is a crazy name too. Johnny Fisher is not as crazy as Luke Partridge, but Johnny Fisher just sounds like a guy that works down the market or drives a cab. Do you know what I mean? Or has a fairly small building company. Or maybe a pest control company. Johnny Fisher, pest control, Romford. But Luke Partridge, such a diabolical name. I'm not even sure where to put it. Like, if you think of the name Luke Partridge, what would a guy called Luke Partridge actually do for a living? Connor says sell pies. Ryan says milkman. Luke Partridge sounds like someone that's from the West Country, doesn't it? Someone that's from Somerset or something. Man's got to be from Devon or Somerset or Cornwall with a name like Luke Partridge. It's so diabolical. A gamekeeper. Yeah. A farmer. A gamekeeper. Oh my days. Yeah. Yeah, gamekeeper. That's got to be the top answer so far. A gamekeeper. Luke Partridge. And sometimes Partridge does dress up in that gamekeeper outfit, doesn't he? You know, with all the tweed. He'll have like the flat cap and like the tweed jacket and all that. He dresses up in that gamekeeper stuff sometimes. Yeah, Luke Partridge, gamekeeper. I'm assuming Harvey is from Somerset. He says, what's wrong with Somerset? Ain't nothing wrong with Somerset, bro. It's just that Luke Partridge sounds like the name of someone who's from Somerset. So I'll give you an example, right? It's quite obvious that in Lord of the Rings, the Shire, where the hobbits are from, is based upon the West Country, right? Somerset, Devon, Cornwall, that part of Britain. Obviously, the Shire is based on that, yeah? As far as the culture and even the accent that they have, that the hobbits have. And look at the names they gave the hobbits, right? Baggins, Bracegirdle, and all these kind of weird English names, yeah? So it's not just me, like, down there they have some, you know, interesting names, you know? G-Man says, for me, it's not the name. It's how casually you address him as Luke Partridge. The Fury fans absolutely hate it. As fans have even come to my lives to complain that you call him Partridge. So it's working then. It's defusing him, disarming him, defanging him. Hyro Protagonist says, I'm trying to work out here and the Partridge stuff is doing me in. Charles says, the Shire is inspired by Sayerhole Mill in Birmingham. That's where Tolkien grew up. Yeah, but I'm talking about the movies. Because I've seen some videos where they say, yeah, it was inspired by where Tolkien grew up and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the way they portrayed the Shire in the movies, they all speak in like a West Country accent, other than Frodo actually, right? And maybe Bilbo. But all the others, like Samwise and all the other people that live in the Shire, they all speak in like this West Country accent. Rosby says, I do miss the Partridge fanboys coming here and getting sent away. Martin says, honestly, the whole Partridge banter just kills me. And you know, I spoke about exactly, Charles B. Imagine a bunch of Brummy hobbits. That'd be crazy. But I spoke about a spiritual principle, which they talk about in like demonology, you know, in like Catholicism and Christianity and stuff like that. And the spiritual principle is that when you call a demon by its real name, you take most of its power away. When you don't know the real name of that demon, it's got a power over you, you know? Again, speak to your local Catholic priest or something, or exorcist, they'll tell you this stuff. And so the idea I had in my head is that this Tyson Fury character is a demon in boxing. I'm not saying he's an evil person in, you know, real life. Like, it's not that deep, bro. It's just boxing. But in the boxing context, he was like a demon, like a trickster demon. And by calling him Luke Partridge, it's as if I took all his power away. That's what was going on in my head anyway. That's how I was thinking. Suck Deep is a crazy name. But I saw another crazy name. I think it was a Korean guy. Have any of you ever seen that show called The Beastmaster? It's like one of them obstacle course shows. And there was like this, there was this Korean guy on The Beastmaster, and he had some crazy name, bro. Like it was the most pause, suspect, you know, rainbow name you've ever heard in your life. Obviously in their culture, it's a normal name, but from an English-speaking perspective, it sounded crazy. I wish I could remember what it was. But it definitely had the name, it definitely had, one of the names was definitely Bang. Do you know what I mean? But it was like, was it like, God, I can't even remember now, but Bang was in there somewhere and it just sounded nuts. Tony S says, Emma Williams' new opponent is called Wendy Toussaint. Is that a man? Or, I mean, Wendy's a woman's name, right? Or is it a French thing? Because, you know, sometimes French people use male women's names for men's names and stuff. Big up O'Neal. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Striker says, and the demons always end up having goofy names. And that's what diffuses them, innit? The fact they have a goofy name and you start calling them by that goofy name. Grind says Congolese, probably. Okay. Connor says, have you watched Supernatural? There's a trickster demon and all sorts. And they mention all about saying the demon's real name throughout the show. I haven't seen that, no. But as I say, it is like a well-known thing in Christian demonology, is to call a demon by its actual name. And that's how you can diffuse them. Max says, Hatman, did you have a private education in the UK as a youngster? No. My parents were not in any kind of position to give me a private education, no. I went to a normal, in the UK we call them a comprehensive school. It's just a normal standard state school. G-Man says, one thing that lives rent-free in my head was when Tony Bellew a few years back was having a go at Partridge and said fighting twice a year isn't enough. I always fought once every 6 months. Yeah, I remember that one. In fact, when you told me that, G-Man, I was like, nah, there's no way that Bellew could have said that. And then I swear you produced a video or an article from somewhere, and I was like, no way. Yo. Yeah, that's an example right there. Vivian, yeah. The French use that as a male name. Even Michelle, right? Michelle, we in the English-speaking world, we know Michelle as a female name, but the French will use Michelle as a male name. All right, peeps, I'm going to wrap this up. I'd like to shout out each and every one of you for joining the conversation, and a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were JR, Matt Borgerson, Prav, James Lynch, Russell, Ryan, Supersized Fries, Paul Thompson, James Clifford, Jazz the First, Brad H, big up Brian again, Mr. Luca, and Mr. A. All right. So until next time, take care, be good, and I'll catch you guys on the other side. I'm out.